Gospel today comes from Luke chapter 18. Then Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not give up. He said, "In a certain town there was a judge who feared neither God nor cared what people thought. And in that same town there was a widow who kept coming to him with the plea, 'Grant me justice against my adversary.' For some time he refused, but finally he said, 'Even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this woman keeps bothering me, I will give her justice, so she won't eventually wear me out with her coming.' Then the Lord said, 'Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God bring justice to his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they receive justice and quickly. But when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?'" This is the word of the Lord. What can we say of this widow? Is she like the toddler who first asks nicely, then begs, then demands a new toy? Or is she like the student who first asks if there might be something wrong with her grade, then asks if maybe it could be changed, and finally asks for some extra credit to make up the difference? Or is she like the hard-working man who spends his life at a company and finally asks and asks and asks again for a raise so he can care for himself and for those who depend upon him? Well, we don't know what this woman was asking, but we do know that as a widow, she had no right to ask for justice. There was no such thing as justice for a widow. She lived on the mercy of those around her, those who were willing to throw her the change from their pockets or the scraps from their table. As far as a place to live, she was completely dependent on whoever inherited her husband's property, whether that was a son or another male relative, and they were completely free to send her away. This woman had no right to justice, and yet was bold enough to go to the judge so many times that he finally relented and gave her what she asked for. It's easy for us to compare ourselves to the widow and the judge to God, but Jesus is very clear that this is not what he means in this parable. At the end, he says, "Listen to what the unjust judge says." If this man, this sinful, evil, unjust man, was able to inadvertently give some justice, how much more will God, who is rich in mercy and love and grace, bring justice to those he loves? What Jesus is saying in this parable, more than something about prayer, is something about faith. At the end, he asks, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? And I think he's asking more about a certain kind of faith, a living, active faith. Not the kind of faith that says, "I believe in God," and sits content, but the kind of faith that is bold, as this widow was bold to ask for something she didn't deserve. Jesus calls us to be bold in our faith as well. In this parable, he talks about the widow who was bold and demanding of a judge, and calls us to be bold and even demanding of God as well. He teaches his disciples in another part of Luke, the prayer we call the Lord's Prayer. And as you know, he doesn't teach them a prayer where they ask God, "Oh, dear God, if you have some time in your busy schedule to maybe think about me and throw me some crumbs." But rather, he teaches them to say, "Give us our bread. Forgive us. Save us." He teaches his disciple a demanding prayer, a prayer that tells God, "I want these things," a prayer that demands of God. Martin Luther, in his explanation of the Lord's Prayer, says, "Surely God already does all of these things. Surely God gives us bread, forgives us, brings us salvation, grace and mercy that we don't deserve. And yet, Jesus calls us to ask them, to demand them of God over and over. Jesus teaches us a bold faith. And yet, as demanding people, we are demanding of a demanding God. As we ask for grace and mercy and love, God demands that we go out into the world and show the same grace and love and mercy to all people. God demands that we feed the poor, clothe the naked, care for those who are in need, tend to the sick, and make justice in the world. That's the kind of faith Jesus is teaching about in this parable. The faith that, while bold enough to demand of the Creator of all things, is also bold enough to go out into the world and do the things the Almighty has demanded of us. Not because they will get us the salvation and grace and mercy that God has already given, but so that we may show the world what kind of God gives that grace. So as we go from this place today, may we have boldness to demand of God that which God already freely gives. And may we also be bold to do that which God demands of us. And may we remember what Jesus taught his disciples, that we should always pray and not give up. Amen.